and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 489, and today's date is October 10th, 2014, and the title of this episode is, Will Ebola be blamed for the collapsing economy? Now, we can see what has been going on around this country. We understand we had one person, they flew into Dallas, Thomas Edward Duncan, he died of Ebola. Now we have other suspected cases popping up all over the country. These are suspected. They are not confirmed. They might have a headache. They might have a sore throat. They might be running a temperature, but it does not mean you have Ebola. So we see that all these different cases are being popped up all around the country, and this is increasing the fear factor of people. And when people see this, they're getting a little nervous. They don't want to travel. They don't want to go out to shop. They don't want to do mostly anything that has to do with a huge amount of people in a public area. Now, the United States government central bankers could use this to explain away why the economy is failing. Now, we have to step back and take a look at this, and we understand that the economy is falling apart. We understand that inflation, unemployment, GDP, all these calculations that the government gives us, they're completely manipulated. They change them to fit their story. We look at the real economic indicators, real estate, retail, unemployment, not in the way that the government looks at it, and we see the economy completely falling apart. Now, we understand the Fed and banks are pumping up the stock market to all-time new highs. This is not an indicator of how the economy is doing whatsoever. We also understand that the central bankers have been pushing gold down because if gold continually rose, people would look at this and say, what's going on? Why isn't the dollar losing value? Why is gold going up? Do we have problems? We also understand that Russia and China are doing everything they possibly can to bypass the dollar. China has been pretty much making bilateral trade deals all across the world, New Zealand, Australia, Switzerland, Canada, UK, to pretty much convert the yuan and renminbi without going through the dollar. We also see there's physical gold exchanges opening up in China and Singapore, and we can see that this is a huge, huge problem to the central bankers. Now, in the Middle East, what we're seeing is that everything is falling apart there, and you have to remember, the oil that is sold in these countries, Libya, Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, these countries right here support the petrodollar. If these countries sell the oil not using the dollar, the entire system falls apart. And what are we seeing there in the Middle East? We're seeing the tribes of those countries rising up, taking back their country, removing the puppet regimes from the country. Most likely, once they take over the country, they will sell this oil not using the dollar. And when that happens, these other countries will not have to keep dollar in reserve. They will then send it back to the United States. Once it comes back to the United States, we will have currency floating around, which will devalue the currency, which will make it look like prices are going up, and we will have a collapse. And we're starting to see a lot of this occur at this time, and this is why the central bankers are out there trying to push war as hard as they possibly can. And this is why they continually want to put other countries on the petrodollar system, because it props it up for a little bit longer, and they're continually doing this. So we can see right now that the economy is completely falling apart. We understand this. Most of the other people who are not paying attention, who are just listening to the corporate media, and they think real estate is at all-time new highs, retail is doing fantastic, unemployment's at 5.9%, they think we're in a recovery. So they could use this Ebola scare to say, this is why the economy is slowing down. This is why things are not going well in the holiday season. This is why we are seeing the economy start to fall apart right now. And they could use this as an excuse. Listen, they used the winter excuse back in January for the first quarter to explain why things weren't going well at all. And of course, as we know, that had nothing to do with it whatsoever. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, we're seeing that Europe is still struggling. Things are not going well. The IMF, they are very, very concerned right now about the economic slowdown in Germany. Because why? because it points to a slower economic growth in the Eurozone as a whole, and they're really very nervous about this whole thing just coming and imploding on itself. So what are they doing here? Well, in Greece, they're kind of recalculating the numbers, and they went back to the 2008 crisis, and they said, you know what? Back then, the crisis was much, much worse than we thought. The recession was much, much worse than we thought. So we're going to bring that down lower. Hey, look, today, Greece looks a lot better off. Well, because what they did was they manipulated the numbers again. They brought the recession numbers way, way down to make the present numbers look much, much better. And they do this all the time here in the United States, and we see it spreading to other countries now. Canada had that problem. Australia had that problem, where they start manipulating the numbers, trying to make it look like the economy is doing much better than it is, and they're just continually doing this. Now, it looks like Chipmakers, you know, the electronic devices where they make chips for, you know, phones, cars, appliances. Well, the demand for electronic devices is weakening. According to circuit makers, September, the peak month for shipping tiny chips used to build everything from appliances to cars to phones and office equipment. They are not doing well. What they're looking at is that as of right now, it usually picks up after the holiday, after the summer and going towards the holidays, and they're seeing none of the momentum that they had in the past, where people are or companies are ordering it, and they're seeing that there is no pickup of orders. In recent weeks, a series of U.S. semiconductor makers with global operations have begun to paint a worrying picture of a broad-based slowdown in markets, including autos and network equipment. So we're starting to see that corporations are saying, wait a minute, there's something terribly, terribly wrong here. We're not seeing orders like we used to. What is going on? And again, this holiday season is not going to go well. The stores, we're going to see many of them completely disappear from the face of the earth. We will never see them again, and most of these stores have been around for a very long time. The Bank of Korea right now, South Korea's central bank, released data that says South Korean domestic deposits have reached about 16.19 billion Chinese renminbi in July this year, which is a 55-fold increase from the same period last year. That number reached about 13.7% at the end of the last year, while at the end of July this year, the renminbi accounted for about 25.9% of all foreign currency deposits in South Korea. We have to remember also the UK will become the first country in the world other than China to issue renminbi-denominated government debt. So we can see right now all these countries out there are making sure they have yuan and renminbi in reserves. They're protecting themselves. They realize the dollar is on its last legs. Now here in the United States, we realize the government officials, they need to pretty much take the weapons away from the people. They're very nervous of people having weapons, especially the veterans, because when things start to come and fall apart, they realize there are going to be certain groups that are going to not be very happy with the government and the central bankers, and they're very nervous about their positions in government, that they might be removed by force. And of course, the government has been preparing for this for a very long time. And we see in California, they created this draconian law where your relatives, friends can tell on you if they don't think you're right in the head to own a weapon. They don't have to have any proof. They're just going to report you to the authorities. Well, there's a new bill intended for the state assembly, modeled after the California's AB 1014. It debuted in Manhattan, Democrat. It would set up a framework to deny firearm possessions to those believed to be dangerous. So this bill that would permit family members or friends or medical professionals or law enforcement, or really anyone who's concerned that somebody having access to guns poses a serious danger, to go to court and present evidence that if the court were persuaded, they would be able to issue a temporary order preventing the person from acquiring or possessing guns. So we're seeing this law now being introduced into New York. There's already in California, And we'll have to watch this and see how many other states or the federal government decide, you know what, we should just make this a federal law where everyone has to abide by. And again, this pretty much violates your Second Amendment, and it is in violation. And they're doing this, of course, to remove the weapons from the people because they're very, very nervous at this time. Now, Jay Johnson, who is the head of DHS at this point, he is saying that the borders are more secure than they have ever been. The nation's southern border is much more secure than the American people think it is. And this is coming from Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson. Not enough has been said publicly by our government in a clear, concise way about our border security efforts on behalf of the American people, and the absence of facts. The American public is susceptible to claims that we have an open, porous border through which unaccompanied minors and members of terrorist organizations such as the Islamic State may pass. And he's trying to tell everyone that no, it's secure, less people are coming through. But then we look at the Pew Research, and for the first time, using a larger census sample from past years, also went back to revise some of their previous estimates. The new figures show an even clearer picture of the surging growth in unauthorized immigrants to a peak of 12.2 million in 2007 from 3.5 million in 1990. After 2009, the population kind of leveled off, and by some measures might have been gradually growing. The report shows variations among states. In Texas, the unauthorized population never saw any significant decline in the last decade. In Florida and New Jersey, the numbers are growing again. So he's trying to fan the flame down on all the illegals coming into this country. Then they are dispersed among 23 different states. And of course, we're getting reports that wherever these illegals go, we're seeing this mysterious illness that's going around that kind of mimics polio at this time. And they all have tracked it back to the illegals who are coming into the country. And we can see right now that they're trying to fan this down. There are elections coming up in November, and all of this is pretty much fake, phony, and false coming from the government. And we can see that there are more and more illegals coming in. I mean, look at the numbers, 3.5 million up to 12.2. It makes no sense what he is saying at this time, and Texas and other states are seeing an increase of illegals coming into the country. Now, what's very interesting with Obamacare, and everybody knows how I feel about that. We understand healthcare.gov was revamped, and they tried to make it work, and a lot of it still doesn't work. But what's very interesting about this is that the premium rates for the plans will not be released on the website until after the election. So when you go to sign up, you will not know how much your health insurance is going to be. Now, why would they be doing this? And this is a quote from Barack Obama. Let me just read this. The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide. Barack Obama. Why would they be hiding the premiums on the website? Well, because, first of all, if they're lower, they want to show this. They want to show the reduced amounts of the premiums because, wow, look how cheap they are. This is great. The reason why they're hiding them is because the premiums have skyrocketed. And they're afraid if they release these numbers, guess what? They won't be voting for the Democrats. Now, I don't really care, Democrat, Republican, it makes no difference to me, as long as you're working for the people. You can belong to no group, makes no difference. But what we're seeing right now is they're hiding this on purpose. Now, if you went in to buy a car, you want to know the price, right? If you're going to buy a product, you want to know the price. Well, the same thing goes with health insurance. If you're choosing something, you need to know the price, but they don't want to show you. And this is not transparent whatsoever. And I know he keeps saying this is the most transparent government there has been in a long, long time, and this is not transparent whatsoever. Now, Liberia is out there, and we know they are pretty much being hammered with Ebola at this time, but don't worry, They are saying that they are open for business. They are ready to receive major international oil companies. They want them to make bids in drilling in 4 blocks off the coast near the capital. Liberia is still open for business, said Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel for Liberia's National Oil Company, and they're accepting bids from all around the world, and we're going to have to watch this to see who actually moves into this area and bids to drill in this area. Now, Sierra Leone is out there, and the authorities are saying that they are counting on Russia's help in their struggle against the deadly virus. They want Russia to come in. We want countries like the Russian Federation, well-positioned countries, to come in to send in teams of medical equipment, medical personnel, anything that can possibly help with the virus, and they want Russia to come in. Earlier on Friday, Russia forwarded a proposal to the United Nations on helping the West African states hit by the deadly Ebola virus. A team of Russian virologists, bacteriologists, they're currently stationed in Guinea. They want to go into Sierra Leone, and it looks like they're getting permission. They're going to ramp up who they're going to send into this area. And again, in each one of these countries, we have China and Russia on one side. We have the United States central bankers on the other, and they're fighting for the natural resources of this country. And right in the middle, what do we have? We have Ebola. Now, like the title of this report says, Ebola could be blamed on the collapsing economy. A surprisingly large number of sectors of the U.S. economy depend on what is called the public faith in the safety of crowds. Tourism, commercial air travel, restaurants, sporting events, and even public transportation all depends on the public believing that coming into close contact with other people is relatively safe activity. If that belief in the safety of crowds is shattered, the public's unwillingness to risk their health and lives will lead to a rapid revenue implosion among numerous sectors of the economy. The World Bank warns about economic consequences of Ebola outbreaks. Air travel to and from the city would suffer a sharp decline in business, and all the local businesses that depend on people gathering in crowds, restaurant, gyms, sporting events, concerts, and more would begin to slide toward bankruptcy. The bigger impact comes from a loss of public transportation. The real economic impact from all of this, however, comes from the loss of faith in the safety of public transportation. All forms of public transportation, by definition, involve masses of people coming and going, potentially touching contaminated surfaces such as subway, car handrails, and others like, the bus rails that you hold on to. The ability of Ebola to spread in subways is especially strong given the lack of natural sunlight in underground tunnels. Ebola could be used as the scapegoat for this collapse of the economy. Now, we can see how they could use this to say, this is why the economy is declining. It wasn't due to the central bankers or the U.S. government. It's starting to slow now. They did this back in January with the winter, saying it was too cold for people to go out there. It was very snowing again. The rest of the country didn't experience the same thing as the Northeast or the North, because the South, the West didn't experience any of the snow or the cold, and they could go out shopping wherever they want. Plus, the online sales did not support what they were talking about at the time, because we would have seen those completely skyrocket and show that everyone went to online sales because they couldn't get out of the home. But that was not part of what was really happening at the time, and now they could be using this scare to explain away why the economy all of a sudden slowed, because we understand that the entire system is collapsing. Now, in Connecticut, we understand there are no cases of Ebola whatsoever, but what has been happening is it seems like the governor there is very nervous, and what they have done is pretty much set up a medical-based martial law type of system going on in there. Governor Dan Malloy has declared a public health emergency in Connecticut, authorizing the isolation of any individual individual reasonably believed to have been exposed to the Ebola virus. State of public health emergency allows bureaucrats to detain and force vaccinate people without due process, despite not one single case being found in Connecticut. If there is a major Ebola pandemic in America, all of the liberties and freedoms that you currently enjoy would be completely gone. And we discussed this before, that yes, they do have the ability to do this. And this goes on to say, and this is what the governor signed today: I hereby declare a public health emergency for the state pursuant to the Connecticut General Statute Section 19A-131A for the duration of the epidemic, specifically in accordance with the Connecticut General Statute Section 19A-131B. I authorize the Commissioner of Public Health to order the isolation or quarantine under conditions prescribed by the Commissioner of Public Health of any individual or group of individuals whom the Commissioner reasonably believes to have been exposed to, infected with, or otherwise at risk of passing the Ebola virus. Now, if one state has done this already, what are we going to see? Other states go ahead and do this. And again, there hasn't been one case inside of Connecticut. And this is what we've been talking about. The fear of it, that's all they need. They don't even need it to spread. Okay, now, France is setting up an external intelligence service listening post in Tunisia. Now, they want to monitor all the Islamic State and the jihadists in the area, and what I really think they're doing is they're monitoring the entire region to see which tribes are rising up, trying to take back the country. Again, Tunisia is right by Libya, and it's that whole North African region, and they're setting this up right now. Russia will create a space-based ballistic missile warning system capable of detecting launches of intercontinental and tactical missiles. The system will be able to detect launches of various types of missiles, both strategic and tactical, including those launched from underwater positions. To build the system, Russia plans to place in orbit a group of new generation satellites and to build a network of modern ground-based information processing centers. And all the equipment that they're putting together now will not be using anything from the United States, even the software. They don't trust it. So they're putting this up there, and they realize what is coming. And of course, what we're seeing right now is many of the countries maneuvering their military assets, setting up, because they realize the central bankers are not going to stop what they're doing. They need to pretty much cover up what is coming. The collapse of the economy here, of the dollar, is coming. They realize it, and this is why they've been positioning in Eastern Europe, Pacific, Africa, the Middle East, and other countries like China, Russia, and other countries have been setting up and protecting themselves because they realize that war is coming. Now, U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel said that they would like to use the Incirlik air base in Turkey, and they would like to train the moderate Syrian forces at that base. And Turkey was hemming and hawing, and they finally said and agreed to support the training and equipping of the moderate opposition in Syria. The U.S. State Department said on Friday, saying a U.S. military team would visit Erdogan next week to discuss the matter. Now, of course, this is all pre-positioning because they're getting ready to go after Assad. So they have to train the Free Syrian Army, which is made up of a lot of paid mercenaries, terrorists, maybe one Syrian, who's getting ready to fight Assad. And we can see they're definitely ramping up. Now, the Turkish president, Erdogan, Friday accused the Syrian President Assad of waging state terror, equating the crimes of the Damascus regime with those of the Islamic State. Erdogan said the Assad regime and the Islamic State were both terror groups who should be dealt with in the same exact way. Assad and ISIS are both responsible for all of these events and tragedies. And he also said something which is very, very interesting. He added, no one can prove that Turkey is supporting ISIS. Why in the world would he mention that? Because there are lots of reports out there saying the Islamic State is, of course, created by the United States, Israel, UK. They're put in here as a proxy army to get into Syria, to cause confusion, and Turkey has been supporting them. And of course, he had to come out with this statement. And again, whatever the government officials say, it's always the opposite. And first of all, Erdogan, he was the one who was sneaking his armed forces over the border into Syria with missile launchers, and he was going to have them fire back into Turkey and to show that Syria was attacking, but he got caught because he was recorded, and then he tried to ban Twitter and YouTube to stop this from coming out, but eventually it did come out. I don't know how many of the Turkish people heard this, but here in the United States, we, and of course all over the in Europe and UK, heard this, and we understood what he was trying to do, because if that happened, NATO would be able to go right into Syria. So we can see you can't really trust what he's really saying at this point. Now, as we know, the buffer zone for Syria is right on schedule. They're getting ready to do it. They're clearing out the east and the northeast. They're training the rebels in Turkey. They're going to be using the air base in Turkey, and they are getting ready. And a couple weeks from now, you're going to see all of a sudden the buffer zone come into play, and they're going to implement it. And of course, Russia is out there, and they're saying, listen, this is illegal. You have to go to the UN Security Council. But again, the Obama administration pretty much doesn't really abide by any type of law. He kind of makes it up as he goes along here, because he is taking orders from the central bankers. They realize this is the end game, and we just have to push this as hard as they possibly can. And what I'm thinking, right after these elections, you're going to see things move much, much quicker. Now, there's a British general. He is out there, and he's saying that the U.S. and U.K. could defeat ISIS in 6 months if they deployed ground troops. Now you can see they're getting ramped up. They're trying to show you that, yes, we can have this all over with if we have boots on the ground. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to have boots on the ground, because we realize there is mission creep in Iraq. They've been sending in advisors over and over, a couple hundred here, a couple hundred there. They're setting up a divisional headquarters in the Spiker base. That will support 10 to 30,000 soldiers there. We have word from Iraq that they're expecting to have 13,000 military soldiers arrive in Iraq, and we're going to see most likely this happen right after the elections, because after the elections, they're just going to go full force in what they need to do. And we can see right now this is building very, very quickly. Now, there are reports out there saying that the Islamic State could use Ebola and turn it into a bioweapon, and they can spread it across the country, and there'd be nothing to stop this. Well, what we're seeing right now is that they're using a lot of fear-mongering, because we realize there's a false flag event looming on the horizon. They're getting us prepared. They're conditioning us to believe that it is going to be some type of terrorist group that is coming after us. And this is all in preparation for us to go to war later on. They need to blame it on another group or country, and you can see they are definitely prepping the American people for this. And in regards to Ebola, what we're also seeing is that the medical establishment is looking to vaccinate pretty much everybody. And we all understand this. We know this. They use this through fear-mongering, scare tactics, and we can see the fear is growing right now. And there's many different agendas along with this Ebola. And a lot of people report that, it was weaponized in Africa, or they were experimenting in Africa and things went terribly, terribly wrong. I still say that it's pretty much contained in these countries where there's a huge amount of natural resources discovered. We just had another similar Ebola outbreak, the Marburg virus in Uganda, where there was a huge amount of oil discovered, and the Chinese are coming in there, bringing in about $400 million for an economic zone. And we can see that this is all being done right now on purpose in that West African area, because we understand that Russia's on one side and China and the United States is on the other, and wherever Russia and China are, that's where the United States goes. Here in the United States and throughout Europe, we're seeing cases pop up, or suspected cases, but not many confirmed cases. And it seems like they're using the fear of this to drive the entire thing. Now, there's never ever just one agenda, and we can see a couple of them already starting to spring up. The medical martial law in the states, they're hoping that this will spread across the country. We'll also see that the drug companies are creating these experimental vaccines, and they're pretty much putting their research into overdrive to get these vaccines out faster than they normally would. And the CDC and other organizations are giving them permission to do this at this time. And we can see that they would love to just pretty much use the vaccines on everybody. And again, we don't know what's in these vaccines. So far, they've been giving them to people, and it doesn't really matter because this strain of Ebola has a 56% that you'll die, 44% that you'll live. So we really don't know if these vaccines work or not. And so far, they gave the man in Dallas the vaccine and he died. They give another person a vaccine and he lives. So without the vaccine, you have the same odds at this point, and they really can't prove anything. There's no trials that they're going through. They're just doing everything willy-nilly, and we really don't know what's in these vaccines. We don't know if they really contain Ebola that would cause us to have Ebola or something else. And it's very suspicious how this all of a sudden ramped up, and it's starting to spread very quickly, and fear is running rampant throughout Europe and the United States. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.